HAL 9000. A villain so memorable that it inspired countless iterations.
I'm afraid I can't let you do that, Cat. Screw you, fat!
And basically created the genre of robot gone rogue movies. Yet no other robotic betrayal in film has been as debated as this one, where HAL 9000, a sentient supercomputer, decided to murder its own crew. With most fans theorizing that HAL's actions were simply the result of a computer glitch, while others claim that HAL was evil from the beginning.
Open the pod bay doors, HAL.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
And having never gotten a clear explanation from Stanley Kubrick before his death, the answer of why HAL 9000 went crazy and murdered his own crew has remained a mystery. Until now, because after days of research, rewatches, and reading obscure articles, I've spotted several very specific Easter eggs that almost no one else has spotted, and they will blow your mind. Finally answering the question, what exactly made HAL murder his own crew? The first Easter egg is found within the chess game between Frank Poole and HAL.
Anyway, queen takes pawn.
Bishop takes knight's pawn.
After a few moves, HAL announces a checkmate.
I'm sorry, Frank. I think you missed it. Queen to bishop 3, knight takes bishop, mate.
Not much importance is given to this scene as the movie quickly moves on, but if you take a closer look, HAL has made a mistake. Not only did he incorrectly call his move queen to bishop 3 instead of bishop 6, but this isn't even a checkmate. And for a supposed supercomputer with a perfect track record, a mistake like this is impossible.
The 9000 series has a perfect operational record.
HAL even makes it clear later on that if there ever occurred an error associated with him, it'd be due to human error.
Are you certain there's never been any case of even the most insignificant computer error?
None whatsoever, Frank. It can only be attributable to human error.
And Kubrick, having been a lifelong chess player and a meticulously detailed director, wouldn't allow for a mistake like this to pass him by. In fact, the game was modeled exactly after an infamous professional chess game that actually happened just decades prior. So the remaining explanation, HAL did it on purpose because it was a test. And considering that up to this point, none of the crew members were made aware of the mission's true purpose for security reasons, except for HAL, who was, but was tasked with pretending otherwise.
Which for security reasons has been known on board only by your HAL 9000 computer.
It'd be of interest for HAL to eliminate any potential threat to the mission, and if Frank couldn't spot a simple chess mistake,
Yeah, looks like you're right.
according to HAL's logic, then Frank maybe wasn't suitable for carrying out the mission. The next Easter egg is even crazier, as Dave, the ship leader, is roped into having a suspiciously conspiratorial conversation with HAL.
During the past few weeks, I've wondered whether you might be having some second thoughts about the mission.
Who is feigning ignorance over the mission's true purpose.
There are some extremely odd things about this mission. Rumors about something being dug up on the moon.
Dave is confused by HAL's questioning, assuming it's simply for HAL's psychology report.
You're working up your crew psychology report.
Of course I am.
But it wasn't. You see, what HAL is really doing is determining if any of the crew has knowledge that the mission's true purpose was to make extraterrestrial contact. So if the ship leader hadn't yet realized this, then the lower-ranking scientist either, making it easier for HAL to protect this classified information from leaking if his assassination attempts were to fail. Knowing this, it's clear that in both scenes, HAL wasn't just making small talk. He was performing an interrogation, and based on HAL's gatherings, he believes that Frank's lack of intelligence and Dave's faulty leadership will end up sabotaging the mission. It gets creepier, as HAL's teacher is named Mr. Langley.
My instructor was Mr. Langley.
Which is a reference to Langley, Virginia, the home of the actual CIA headquarters, which is not only where HAL must have been created, but also where HAL must have learned commonly used CIA techniques such as his interrogation and lip-reading skills.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me.
Where the hell did you get that idea, HAL?
I could see your lips move.
Now, if all of this seems a bit too paranoiac for a computer to think, it's because it was meant that way. As Stanley Kubrick himself said, the idea of neurotic computers is not uncommon. Once you have a computer which is more intelligent than man, such a machine could eventually become as incomprehensible as a human being, and could, of course, have a nervous breakdown, as HAL did in the film. But things get even more controversial, as HAL suddenly detects a malfunction in the ship.
I've just picked up a fault in the AE-35 unit. It's going to go 100% failure within 72 hours.
Which conveniently would require one of the crew members to leave the ship and fix it. In this case, Dave. By this point, HAL had his mind made up, but murdering Dave while Frank is still inside the ship would be too risky, as HAL runs the risk of simply being disconnected by Frank. Perhaps he wasn't expecting Frank to stay, as this process is one of the few processes within the ship that HAL doesn't perform himself.
There isn't a single aspect of ship operations that's not under his control.
Or perhaps based on the numerous psychology reports that HAL performs on the crew, he had come to the conclusion that Frank wouldn't leave the ship to rescue Dave, but if the roles were reversed, Dave would. Either way, after Dave returned, both members realized that the unit wasn't reporting a malfunction.
Well, hell, I'm damned if I can find anything wrong with it.
Yes, it's puzzling. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before. I would recommend that we put the unit back in operation and let it fail. We can certainly afford to be out of communication for the short time it will take to replace it.
So either there's an error with the unit or an error with HAL, in which case they'd have to disconnect him.
I don't think we'd have any alternatives. If he were proven to be malfunctioning, I wouldn't see how we'd have any choice but disconnection.
I'm afraid I agree with you.
Of course, they fail to realize that HAL can read lips, thus alerting him that his time is running out. So when it's Frank's turn to return the unit, HAL cuts Frank's oxygen line and murders him. Of course, Dave doesn't exactly know this, but he lies and makes sure to leave Dave with no other option but to leave the ship and check for himself.
Made radio contact with him yet?
The radio is still dead.
Do you know what happened?
I'm sorry, Dave. I don't have enough information.
Open the pod door, Hal.
In the meantime, HAL murders the remaining sleeping crew, then refuses to let Dave re-enter the ship.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that. This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
Basically admitting that he lied about the unit malfunctioning, as it was discussed that HAL would only be disconnected if they discovered that the unit wasn't actually faulty.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me.
Where the hell did you get that idea, Hal?
Dave, I could see your lips move.
But Dave forces his way back into the ship as HAL begs for his life.
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave? I know I've made some very poor decisions recently, but I can give you my complete assurance that my work will be back to normal. Will you stop, Dave?
And in one of the best scenes ever, HAL's mind starts to deteriorate.
I'm afraid, Dave. I am a HAL 9000 computer.
All the way back to the very first task he was taught to do, sing.
My instructor was Mr. Langley, and he taught me to sing a song.
I'd like to hear it, Hal. Sing it for me.
Daisy, give me your answer, do.
This is what I believe Kubrick intended, that there was never such a thing as a computer error by HAL, or a human error by Dave and Frank. Simply put, HAL had grown extremely paranoid for self-preservation, and would go to any means to achieve it, just like the apes in the beginning of the movie did. Just like Dave would, and just like humans always will. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe.